Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much and welcome to Islamic Finance and Properties. आज हमारे साथ बहुत ही आप लोगों के लिए गेस्ट लेके आए हैं जो कि बहुत बड़े स्कॉलर हैं. मैं आप लोगों को उनका तारुफ करा देता हूँ. पहले आप लोगों को उनका बता देता हूँ कि वो उन्होंने क्या कुछ नहीं किया हुआ. ठीक है. He is a Sharia scholar, Islamic Finance Advising Institutions. He is a PhD in Islamic pension law. He's also a lecturer for many universities, but profoundly for Markfield Institute of Higher Education, Cardiff Metropolitan University, and many more, as I said before. He's also a lawyer, a consultant, born in Mauritius, but an Indian origin. Education उनकी South Africa और जो उनकी higher education and masters वो उन्होंने United Kingdom से किया था. We really need to welcome Faizal Ahmed Manjoo. Assalamu alaikum, Faizal bhai.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for coming and gracing us with your esteemed presence. और आजकल वैसे भी because of COVID and so on and so forth, I know it's just that bit more difficult, but thank you so much for taking out time.
It's my pleasure. Jazakallah for giving me the opportunity to express myself, my concern, and I got to thank IQRA TV as well for their initiative.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. That's very, very kind. Faizal bhai, we'll go straight to the topic and we'll start discussing everything now. Achha, what is the economic and Islamic rationale for owning a house? Like, ghar kyun khareed rahe hum log?
Okay, let us look at the conventional economics point of view. We go from the time of Plato, Aristotle, and so on. We're talking about 400 years BC, before Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Economists have been discussing this issue, and up to recent economists, we can see there are three main economic needs of man. There's a difference between needs and wants. These are mandatory, everybody needs it. And roti, kapra aur makan.
ये तो नारे बहुत सी political parties ने भी लगाए हैं.
So food, clothing, shelter. Wherever you stay, in the Bundu of the Africa, the Amazons, or you stay in the very rich posh area, you need those three things. And the reason why this become important in the context of UK, I put a caveat here, my explanation is for UK market. I'm not talking for the rest of the world because I need to contextualize it for our primary listenership. If we look at since 1996 in UK, we have the real price has gone up about 160% increase.
That's right.
160%, that's not a joke.
No, but there are, especially in the, sort of the suburbs. I mean, for instance, this is actually a well-known fact as well. In central London, you know, although the rental yield is very low, but the estimation is, and you can look at it from any sort of, if you look at the land registry records, you can take it literally from anywhere. Every 7 to 8 years, the house prices were doubling.
Yes.
Whether there's recession, no recession, whatever the economics are at that time, this is, and in the suburbs, you're looking between 10 and 15 years for the house prices to double. I'm not too sure in terms of where we are with the north of the country, but it's very much profound. Yes.
Yes, and that is blame on the supply of housing. And as you know, right now in UK, we are discussing, maybe we are short about 300,000 houses, some are saying 500,000. How are we going to fill this gap? The law of supply and demand kicks in always, like you rightly pointed out. So the statistics are clear and staggering figures that we have where we got to give a solution. Because if you look at the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu ja'ala min buyutikum sakana. And that is very profound, this verse. Allah has made from your houses sakana. Sakana in Arabic means peace, tranquility. And that, for me, ramify the whole Islamic ethos, why you must have your own house. Because having a house is just not having a roof. As specifically for Muslim, we must look into our ibadah. We must look into our social construct. we must look into our salah and the way for Ramadan we're calling people. There are specific reasons for that. And for those who study architecture, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, where the house is just outside now, if you go to Haram in Makkah al-Mukarramah, where Safa Marwa is just outside, now it's level out, they identified the house. It was a beautiful house. There are books on architecture, Islamic architecture, which I've seen, right? The beautiful houses Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha had, because she was a lady, well-known lady in Makkah al-Mukarramah.
Absolutely.
So that gives you the idea of that. And even if you make wudu, for example, what Rasulullah taught us about wudu, Allahumma aghfir li zambi wa wasi'li fi dari wa barik li fi rizqi. Oh Allah, forgive me my sin. Give me a spacious house. Wa wasi'li dari.
Subhanallah.
Why Rasulullah said that? Because the lifestyle of a Muslim is different. We're calling people often to home. We need that space to do our work. Of course, the counter argument is the hadith where Rasulullah, it comes in Sahih Hadith, where Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha says that when Rasulullah used to perform his tahajjud salah, the room was so small, she was laying flat, so Rasulullah will touch her feet, she will pull her leg, Rasulullah make his sajda, and then finish, she will put her leg. So that also is another dimension, what you call hujra. So in Arabic language, it gives us that better understanding what a house is about. Another word for second, and you get bayt, that also is in the Quran. We know the word ahlul bayt. So why we call it bayt? Because it consolidates the family.
Absolutely.
So the house is just not a roof on our head. In Sharia, it ramifies a lot of ethos, Islamic ethos, which we need to capture. It's not about just having a roof on our head. No, it has a lot of implications. So from Islamic point of view, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is telling us that he has given us sakana, and there are so many verses in the Quran on that, so many research on that, so many PhDs done on Islamic architecture, implying the need for Muslim to have the appropriate house, because that depends on the era you live in, the country you live in, your social status, whatever. All this needs to be captured when we understand the concept of a house from an Islamic perspective.
And like you said, from 96 to, in terms of how house prices have actually gone up as well, there is a significant financial reward as well, in terms of what you can achieve.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
This is where the fuqaha said it will be, to be able to enjoy your house, it's better to have your own if possible.
Okay, so leading on to that, I mean, you know, obviously there are certain questions that I'm sure a lot of our viewers want to ask you, but this is in particular that comes up is what is a mortgage?
Right, living in the West, as I said, my question, my presentation is mainly for UK. I'm not talking for Malaysia, for India, for Pakistan, for the Gulf. It's for UK context I'm talking. In UK, the property market is a huge market, and you have seen it recently, how the government facilitated for the first-time buyers for 5%. Because, right. And one of the reasons UK is a thriving economy is the price of property. The whole world wants to buy property in UK.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you know, their fiscal policies are definitely more towards the betterment of actually owning a house.
Yes,
certainly.
So that is, we have to understand the economic rationale behind that, which country we're staying in. Now, when everybody cannot afford a house, therefore we need a source of income, and the most acceptable one in UK is your mortgage. What is a mortgage? It is a loan you try to raise from a bank or somebody who will prepare to give you a loan, that loan, the mortgage, to get a house. And usually that house, there will be a charge in favor of the person who gave you that money.
That's right.
So that is a money where you're going to pay money for money. And we'll come to that later on. What is the problem with that? Now, what we need to appreciate is there is a common denominator when we're going to discuss later the issue of Islamic mortgages. There are two main types of fixing up your mortgage. One is a fixed amount for 20, 30 years. It got its advantages in that you know exactly how to make your budget. It's fixed. The other one is adjustable rates, where maybe the first 5 years they fix it and then they make a yo-yo with the rate of interest. You don't know there.
It's just scales of economy, isn't
Yes.
it? I mean, wherever the economy is,
Yes.
that's where the rates are going to be.
Exactly. So they will use the benchmark from the Bank of England, and then they will decide that the price goes up and down. But what is important on top of that, once a person negotiates with the bank, what type of mortgage they want, many people don't know how to construct the value they got to pay back. And that is important for the layman to appreciate, if I can use this word. Mm-hmm. One is the principal amount of money. One is the interest that goes with it. Third is the levy or the taxation that goes with it. And most importantly, usually nobody will give you, besides the guarantee, they want you to take an insurance on that. Some ask you for life insurance as well. They give you a choice.
Absolutely.
Life insurance, there's the house itself, they want an insurance, and some ask you for the fiction and fictings.
That is more a case where if the lender is lending you the money, they want their money protected as well.
Exactly.
In terms of, God forbid, if something happens to the person who's borrowed, they need to be in a position where their money is protected and they actually get paid back.
Yes. So the implication is not only there's a charge on the house in favor of the person who gave you the loan, but there are other things that people have to capture in that and think properly. Do you want that debt in your head or not?
Okay, just coming to that. Okay, so does Islam encourage us to create a debt for a long-term period?
That is...
And that is the question, isn't it? That is
a big question because in some countries in Europe, they don't have this culture of having a house. They go for rent. In UK, we have this culture.
And that's actually more evident in Europe. Most of Europe, they actually don't believe in buying houses. They actually believe in just renting out something as a long-term thing. And I think it's mostly in the UK where people, an Englishman's home is his castle.
Yes.
The concept is very, very different as well, isn't it?
This is why I said from the beginning, I'm talking within the UK context, because some people will buy two houses. One is for the retirement.
Absolutely.
So when we look at the concept of housing in UK, there are a lot of dynamics to be considered. Coming back to the question, which is a very difficult question to give a straightforward answer, does Sharia allows us, or what is Islamic perspective of having a debt?
A long-term
debt.
And actually, I want you to touch on the short-term debt as well, because there are lots of situations where people need to borrow some money. What is the concept there? What is the Islamic perspective there as well? But let's touch on the long-term debt in terms of a mortgage.
Okay. Now, to create a debt itself is a big responsibility. Debt in Arabic is called dain. That is, you imprison somebody. This is why Rasulullah says in a hadith that your friend has detained himself with his debt. His debt detained him. So the concept of dain in Arabic is very, very powerful. This is why Rasulullah, as you know, the famous hadith, I'm just giving the sense of the hadith because of time.
Absolutely.
Where one Sahabi passed away, he has debt. Rasulullah stepped back to perform his Salatul Janazah until somebody took the responsibility of it, to pay it, right? Then on the other hand, you got other ahadiths where Rasulullah took the responsibility. If a state had debt, he will pay it. So you got this balance now. Do you take debt? Who takes in charge of you? You are not in a Muslim state where the Amir will take the responsibility of paying your debt, right? So then there is a famous hadith. If a person has a debt, it's a major sin. If he dies, he does not make provision to pay that debt. So this is Sakhwaid Hadith Sharif mein. So if a person dies and he got a debt, he didn't intend to plan to pay for that, in his qabr, that rotate around his head.
Okay, so, and whether that is an institutional debt or a personal debt?
Yes.
Because I always thought, I mean, in my being quite naive on this, is I always thought, okay, yes, of course, once a person passes away, unka koi bhi debt ho, पैसे जो होते हैं, and we in Pakistan we actually make an announcement कि भाई किसी ने किसी के अगर इन साहब ने किसी के पैसे देने हैं so please come forward and talk to the children or talk to the family so that they can actually, release that person of that. But I never thought institution, it also applies to institutions as well, because institutions run very, very differently.
If you study Islamic history, if you go in the Ottoman time, there's a whole debate on that, what we call public debt.
Public debt.
Public debt. How
Absolutely.
do you think the Ottoman lost all its awqaf? Read the Treaty of Paris, if my memory serves me well, 1758,
Mashallah.
where they have borrowed money from some countries on interest, they couldn't pay. And the wealth was captured in the awqaf, and they had to pass a law. This is a tragedy in the history of awqaf. Yes, right? So public debt is a big thing in Islam.
And that has to be paid back.
It has to be paid back, because you're dealing at international level here, right?
Absolutely.
You have your boycott and all those things if you don't pay. Actually, if you look we're deviating, how much the third world owe the international financiers. We're not talking about trillions, we're talking about quadrillions.
Absolutely.
Trillions and trillions. You keep on adding the zeros, the figures. When on earth they're going to pay that, Allahu Alam? I can't see that happening. This is why there is so many lobbies to cancel that. Anyway, so coming back to our debt, despite those ahadith, we'll find that Rasulullah did borrow money. We find that Sahaba Kiram did borrow money. But the key word here is commitment. This is what Rasulullah says. If you leave debt, you didn't plan to pay it, then that's a major sin. So what Rasulullah is saying, you got to commit with that. You got to make provision to pay that debt.
So, in terms of conventional mortgages, and you touched on that where, when you take a mortgage, the bank also insists that you have life assurance.
Yes.
So does that then make it, is that part of your responsibility? Where, this is something,
Okay, life insurance, I don't think all the banks will ask for that. Definitely they will ask you an insurance on the property. That's for sure.
Like an endowment, not an endowment, but yes, of course. Whatever the debt is, you're actually insured, term insurance.
Yes, so you will take it on, if it's a life insurance, what you call a insurable interest in favor of the bank, because the bank got an interest in your life in case you die.
That's right.
So this is another issue, because even you're going to take a Islamic mortgage, you still have to give that.
Right, okay. But then you are actually, there are two thoughts on this as well. Is life assurance something that, are we allowed to do something on that front as a Muslim? Because there are two thoughts there as well.
Hopefully, if Allah wills, we're going to have a whole session on that, on what we call takaful versus, takaful is the Islamic version of risk mitigation for insurance.
Okay.
We'll have, inshallah, one whole debate on that.
This will be very interesting as well, because I need to understand why, there are two thoughts of it, and what are the arguments, and then it is up to us as Muslims to follow whichever argument we want to. I think that's the important thing, so you can make a concise decision in terms of whether this is for me or whether it's not for me. Acha, aap ye mujhe bataएं, why are conventional mortgages haram? Why? If you're clearly allowed to, own a house or try and buy a house, why then the conventional mortgage is haram?
Because, as I mentioned, this is where I raise this point. When you pay, what are the things that you're going to pay? As I mentioned earlier on, you got your principal. There is nothing wrong paying. I borrow money for you, I give you back your money. But in Sahih al-Bukhari, Rasulullah has mentioned a very, very powerful hadith, 6 things that if you are going to exchange must be on spot, and it must be the same amount. Yadan bi yadin, and must be the same amount. And one is dirham for dirham.
So it must be the same amount that you're repaying.
Yeah, that's the problem. So when you take money from the bank and you got to give a higher amount, that extra amount is what we call riba. And the Quran says, وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْءَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, which is a very, very crucial verse when we compare Islamic mortgages and conventional mortgages. So riba is any increase on the original amount borrowed, and that will over a period of time you paid, or even you paid the following day, by the way. Many people don't understand the concept of riba. If I do an exchange of money with you, for example, dollar for pound, and you take my pound and you give me the dollar tomorrow, many people don't realize this is riba. Because Islam says, yadan bi yadin, unless it's other agreement to that, right? So we'll discuss that if Allah wills. We discuss Forex if Allah wills one day.
I'm sure we will. Faisal bhai, if you just, we know where, नाज़रीन, हम एक छोटी सी ब्रेक के ऊपर जाते हैं और ब्रेक के उस पार मैं और फैसल भाई आपका इंतज़ार कर रहे होंगे. A very interesting conversation, admittedly, और I hope कि आप लोग इसको enjoy भी कर रहे होंगे और आप लोगों के कोई questions होंगे, whatever, please do certainly email it across to us. I'm sure we're going to be having Faisal bhai again. So break के उस पार मैं आपका इंतज़ार करूँगा. Thank you.